Greetings, noble ones. I am Sir Eoth. For months, we've traced Natlan's story in fragments. The rise of dragons, the fall of empires, and the myth passed from tribe to tribe. But now that Natlan's tale has reached its end, those fragments must be reforged into one. This is the complete history of Natlan, told from the first spark to its final cinders.
Our journey does not begin in Natlan, nor even in Teyvat. It reaches back beyond the reckoning of mortals, over 6,000 years ago, to a time when the notion of Teyvat was yet unformed, before the heavenly principles took hold, before the firmament itself was sealed beneath a false sky. Balance reigned supreme. The Light Realm and the Void Realm stood in opposition, and only the dragons and mishaps roamed the land, governed by the will of their 7 sovereigns, each an elemental lord of their own dominion. At the center of it all stood the primeval Dragon King, most likely Xbalanque, who dreamt of leading his kin beyond the bounds of the Light Realm, seeking distant stars upon which his people might flourish. Yet, they were not the only ones who beheld this world with wonder. A celestial scribe, belonging to a higher order forbidden from interfering with mortal civilization, cast her gaze upon Teyvat. Stricken by its beauty, she sought to bestow upon Xbalanque the gift of the boundless night sky, offering him the stars in exchange for forsaking his kind. He promptly refused. For him, the journey to the cosmos could only be undertaken together. She vowed to return, and return she did, but upon her arrival, the Light Realm she once knew had been broken, splintered into 7 elements, shackled by the laws of the heavenly principles, and veiled beneath a false sky. In defiance of her order, she stepped into this world, discarding her former self and assuming the guise of a young girl. There is one such figure in our time who mirrors this being. Alice, the enigmatic outlander, and bound by the laws of Teyvat. She who tells the tales of those erased by Irminsul, whose voice carries the weight of distant knowledge. It is no coincidence that only those untouched by Teyvat's constraints, Alice and Dainsleif, are entrusted to narrate the stories of those beyond or forgotten by this world. But let us return to the past. At the same time, the ancient era of dragon civilization was taking place. Their civilization replaced the then perfect united first civilization of humans, who had been punished for their arrogance by the heavenly principles in their attempt to free themselves from fate. Yes, it was the same humans who were part of Enkanomiya. There you go, I couldn't stop myself from mentioning Enkanomiya again. Humans, in their punishment, were reduced to primitive beings, with dragons seizing this opportunity to claim dominion over Natlan. From the heart of the great volcano of Tollan, the dragons forged their sanctuary, the sacred city of Tollan. Within its depth, shielded by a false sky of their own making, their wisdom flourished once more as the first bastion of draconic civilization since the fall of the race at the hand of the usurper from the sky. In real-life legends, Tollan is the birthplace of the first people where language and divine knowledge is bestowed upon them. To enter the Dragon City, one must take the leap into the volcano itself, a trial echoing the sacrifice of Nana Huitzin, the Aztec deity who cast himself into the flames to become the sun. The sacred city was governed by 13 sovereign rulers, dragon lords as I shall name them to distinguish them from their elemental sovereigns. Of these, the first stood above all, feared even by his peers. The dragon lord you are most familiar with, Kuuvahki, originates from this era. From this city, settlements rose, among them Chichen Uktoka and Natlan, the latter being tied to worrying and gruesome tales of Men of Lithin, which I will cover and bring my own theories on in time. Among them was Kukulkan, who would become the Sage of the Stolen Flame, brother to Xiuhcoatl himself, one who had not only witnessed the war against the heavens, but had taken part in it. Despite the bestial consonance of dragons, they were creatures of profound sophistication. Their society reveled in modern luxuries, intricate craftsmanship, and high-stakes politics. the 13 Dragon Lords would deliberate in chambers where the fate of their kind was decided. Predicting humanity's rapid growth, dragons turned to clandestine observation, pulling unseen strings to maintain control over the primitive men. In the meantime, Xiuhcoatl, seeking a new course for his kin, pioneered the development of a stellar craft alongside a select few, guided by the unparalleled wisdom of his brother. Kukulkan, the mastermind behind star forging, assisted in the birth of a marvel. Astral assemblages, highly pressurized spheres of energy, likened to the assembly of moons. These were no ordinary constructs, for dragons had once forged the very remnants of the ancient moons scattered across Natlan's skies. In awe of his brother's achievement, Xiuhcoatl proclaimed that even Xbalanque would have bowed in reverence to Kukulkan, for their unreachable stars were now within hand's reach. The story of the land continues in ancient texts, giving us, in parallel, the history of humanity's early development and the forefather of all tribes, the Sage of the Stolen Flame. The Sage, notorious for having brought phlogiston stolen from the one known as the Great Dragon, was himself believed to be a dragon due to his achievements that nobody else could replicate. His story begins further back, even before the story of Maawe, as the first Pyro Archon hadn't been born yet, and so nobody had visions. Humans were fully subjected to the elements with no control over them. Those humans are not as old as the first people, which Enkanomiya was a port of, as they meet the more primitive trait that symbolizes their punishment after Celestia struck them down, as humans wished to free themselves from fate, which was seen as insolence by the heavenly principles. This is confirmed by the blazing sacrificial heart's hesitance, the ascension material, a dagger used by past tribes to carve their own hearts out in offering and sacrifices. The sage was sent with a fool, Shaq, by the Lord of the Night, to obtain a rainbow shining stone from a great winged dragon. Shaq wished to throw himself at the dragon and fight him directly for the stone, which the sage dissuaded him of, making the fool realize how powerless he was before a dragon. Through the sage's plan, the dragon was blinded by the sage, and the duo was able to enter the dragon's lair, praising his radiance and pretending to be doctors who could cure him. Continuing their trickery, they replaced the dragon's teeth with grain fruit, making it inoffensive, allowing them to part with the precious stone in hand. The sage, aware of the dragon's powers but that their intellect wasn't particularly superior, realized that the source of their power came from the stone. By breaking it open, the sage was blessed with the power of dragons we know as phlogiston. He wished to pass along phlogiston to humanity, but in these ancient times, their comfort was their ignorance, as they did not see a purpose to this glorified fire, as they could meet all their needs for fire and fuel with flint and wood. Through another plan, Shaq and the sage managed to gather curiosity for the phlogiston, allowing humans to come to wield its powers, propelling humans to an age of civilization, building a city, temples, and effigies far above ground. Following their new mastery, the sage decided to raise the newly built city ever higher, ordering its people to not consume anything that comes from the land anymore, except for water, as all waters come from the source of all waters, known as Fontaine. A bit self-explanatory, I know. Wishing to attain through this ascension what he referred to as the lunar continent and the Newark Holy Stone, the Lord of the Night himself understood what the sage wanted: push humanity out of the bounds of Natlan and leaving Teyvat altogether. The Lord of the Night decided, under the guise of a regular human, to spread the benefits of the land-grown products, such as alcohol, causing everyone to become drunk, and, due to their state, having the sage kick them out of the city and returning to the fairgrounds of Natlan, bringing phlogiston down with them. The sage departed on his own,
and the age of humans of Natlan started. Shak was now known as a brave and wise hero who took away the phlogiston away from the sage. And, in a dire battle against a powerful wicked dragon, gave birth to the first man-made tribe. Humans being subject to the passage of time, Shak was left to stand alone, his companions having all passed of age or in battle. Wishing to reunite with his companions on the last moments of his life, Shak climbed the highest mountain and called out to his companions of old, lighting the first flame. In his call, the god of the night realm answered, and humans throughout Natlan have heard voices and whispers of familiar voices from a different plane, recognizing their old friends and companions. This signed the birth of the first Wayob of the Night Kingdom. To this day, the influence of the Sage of the Stolen Flame is still felt throughout the land, being the character referring to you as the Traveler, as the Chosen of Dragons, telling us about his past dealings with Xbalanque, as well as his potential nature as a dragon.
3,000 years ago, when the tale of Coquitao unfolded, this legend belongs to the Masters of the Night Wind, brought by grim birds in service of the moon with a broken face. Their tales are woven from 3 silver strands of moonlight, tracing back to an era following the death of the 3 Moon Sisters, or at least 2 of them, according to other tales. Coquitao was a warrior outlander, one who predated the tribes of men. His homeland, they say, lay beneath a distant midnight, where a frigid sun cast its pale glow. By all accounts, he was Kenrian, his existence intertwined with the Eclipse dynasty, the so-called Dark Sun, which arose as the crimson moon faded into obscurity. What is a dark sun if not a frigid sun, let alone a frost moon? He wandered the land, bearing a stone club named Makana, bound to the will of the deity of the dog days. His charge? To hunt those who had forsaken death itself, to bring them an end beyond reversal, veiling them in freezing storms. He was not alone. By his side stood Nagwal, a shapeshifter from a land of endless fire, perhaps none other than Marijivari. But fate is ever treacherous. Upon the slaying of the final immortal, Coquitao sought to see his soul return to its homeland. The deity he served refused, and in that moment, treachery struck. Nagwal, the very one he called companion, turned upon him, his black blade severing Coquitao's head from his body. Yet, death did not claim him. He had been cursed with immortality, bound to wander aimlessly, his purpose stolen from him. But vengeance found an ally among the heavens. The mistress of celestial stars, perhaps the Shade of Life herself, or the very frost moon, was angered by the fate of her hero. She granted him the strength to enact his retribution. For many nights, primitive men whispered of a headless figure, Makana still in hand, his form shifting into black spirits, an omen of nightmares and inspiration alike. When he finally found Nagwal, revealing by an oasis, raising Makana high, he struck, brutally shattering his skull. But it was not enough. He struck once more, then again, until the traitor's body was cast into the flames of the homeland from which it came. A fitting end for a demon of hell if such he was. Yet vengeance is but a hollow feast. Though he had outlived his betrayers and the tricksters who wronged him, he was still consumed by an icy rage burning eternal, as if he had become the cold sun of his homeland. To this day, legends tell of his silhouette still wandering beneath dead moonlight, his fury undying. But as Coquitao's tale reached its grim conclusion, another saga unfolded in Natlan.
One of these dragons' stories takes place here. Its name was Maawe, from the book Maawe the Tonatiuh, long before humans were even united by tribes. Maawe was a young dragon who did not share the pride and dignity of its kin. It was instead fascinated by the tales and songs of the Manitou, the omnipresent life force within all living beings. including plants and trees. There are both good and evil Manitous in folklore, although in Teyvat they seem to be nothing more than cute blobs of paint. Maawe was banished by its fellow, seeing its carefree attitude and interest in humans as indolent. Labeled a juvenile whelp who lacked the ambition and the fury that defines the proud dragons. Maawe was roaming the lands, followed by one of the Manitou it was so fascinated by, as its closest and only companion. In their pilgrimage, they witnessed the transformation of dragonkind. Coming across mountains and caverns, it came to see fellow dragonborn, who grew silent and fond of the cavern's depth, now living in the mountains. Those dragons became the Tipathlizors. Entering a forest, Maawe called to its kin, being met once again by silence and the sound of rustling leaves. The dragons here having also grown silent and accustomed to the canopy, having become reduced to the Xiuhcoatl. Once again, in a land of fog, Maawe came across its kin, who warmly invited, if not implored it, to stay and dream with them. Perhaps those were the Ictomizors. Maawe finally came to find an elder dragon that could give it the answer it sought, as this dragon was the same as Maawe, not sharing the sense of fury and dignity of its kin. The dragon, understanding Maawe's quest of fury, could not give it what it wanted, and closed its door to the young dragon and the Manitou. Unfortunately, after enduring much of this pilgrimage with Maawe and come so far from its land, the Manitou lost its vigor and its life. Maawe honored its companion's last wish and scattered the Manitou's body into a pool of sulfur, giving birth to a beautiful, clear spring of water, creating the first hot spring of Natlan. Maawe claimed this hot spring as its home, causing its body over time to change shape, becoming the very first Qoyllor, giving rise to the Metzli, the future tribe known as the People of the Springs, who inherited the song of Maawe and its Manitou friend, to be remembered for a long time. Within the artificial confines of Tollan, where a false sky shielded them from the watchful heavens, the dragons embarked on another grand endeavor enabled by the astral assemblages, Huitzilopochtli, the doomsday device designed for mutual annihilation. And while I have covered this creation before, new revelations have surfaced, ones that shift our understanding. Xiuhcoatl believed his craft would endure eternally, ensuring the undying radiance of his primal flame. He crowned himself creator, shaper, and forger of all names, the very progenitor of soil and gold. As Daya might take issue with that last claim, though you could chalk it up to an excess of zeal. Eventually, the Dragon Lords claimed the right to hunt humanity, and fate struck back. Two of their own fell to human hands. Following this event, the Fourth Lord ceased attending the council, claiming a breakthrough in his research, one tied, I suspect, to dragonkind's devolution into the Saurians, and the enigmatic conversion of life into phlogiston, all linking back to Huitzilopochtli. Far from the sacred city, ancient texts recount how dragons experimented upon their devolved kin, seeking a way to restore lost wisdom. A solution was found, though it came at a dire cost. Saurians blessed by the Pyro-Sovereign's lineage could regain knowledge, their bodies surging with accelerated growth, but the price was steep. They would soon regress into a form even more grotesque than before, with even less intelligence to spare. A discovery fitting for the Fourth Dragon Lord. He and Dottore would no doubt become best friends. The Fourth Dragon Lord's name bore an interesting connection to two others. First is Ishled, simplified from Ish Ushul Tsib Boron Chuulin. Once the Ninth Lord and Sovereign of Chiichen Uktoka, she would be deceived and overthrown by Ochkan later on, using her territory to give rise to Ochkanatlan. Her name in Mayan Sertal contains Chuulin, signifying the essence of the soul, which is divided in 13 parts.
A curious parallel to the 13 Dragon Lords themselves, which I believe is why every Dragon Lord is referred to as CL within the records, using Xiuhcoatl as honorifics more than a part of their names. The 4th Dragon Lord's full name reveals a chilling familiarity. Ak Auk Kumilal Kan Xiuhcoatl. The name starts with Akao, and he was described as decadent and disdainful. Akao himself is sustained by phlogiston, which was a part of the research of the 4th Dragon Lord. Their tie is reinforced by Ixhled referring to our Akao as an old colleague of hers. This effectively puts the goofy Akao right below sovereign level. The council, faced with 2 fallen lords and 1 in seclusion, the remaining 10 debated a motion of neutralization, a calculated purge of human settlements to curb their unchecked expansion. Yet they hesitated, fearing it would unify humanity against them by giving humans a common enemy, the motion failing to gather enough votes as a result. During their debate, their choice of words implied that they predicted humanity's nature, wishing to use them to elevate their species and reclaim the land for themselves once more, creating an interesting parallel to Men of Lithin. Kukulkan stood in opposition to their growing tyranny. For this, the council turned against him, stripping him of his authority without contest. He had foreseen the dragon's downfall, understanding that violence alone would not sustain their race. In his wisdom, he knew that salvation for both races could only be found by exchanging their knowledge, prompting him to steal a part of the phlogiston seed from Xiuhcoatl's science, parting for a land untouched by the filth of the abyss. Among humanity, Kukulkan found purpose. He imparted knowledge of phlogiston, teaching its language, its vast potential, and the intricate balance it upheld. Yet, humanity, as ever, wielded power as a weapon, waging war upon itself rather than ascending toward enlightenment. Meanwhile, Xiuhcoatl, longing for his lost brother, named Tollan's greatest automaton in his honor. But time marched forward. 1,000 years passed, or from our perspective, 2,000 years ago, and war erupted. Dragons launched full-scale attacks against humans, only to meet fierce resistance. One name rose above all others: Xbalanque, the warrior bright as the sun, who rallied the scattered tribes against their oppressors. Kukulkan, now deeply intertwined with humanity, sought to bridge the gap between the 2 species, bringing forth his own child, Ochkan. A prodigy beyond compare, Ochkan bested even grown mishaps in his youth. Xiuhcoatl himself, upon seeing him, would be unable to discern whether Ochkan was human or dragon. His fate was one of unparalleled consequences and of a promising future for a new race. In Tollan, the council met once more, this time condemning the 8th Dragon Lord, the priestess of floral candles, for treason. She had taken in a human girl, raising her as a daughter and even commissioning a weapon for her, crafted by dragon hands. But when the girl allied with Xbalanque, the council deemed her guardian guilty. Only the First Lord and the accused herself dissented, the rest decreed her execution. Xbalanque's influence only grew. He cut through Dragon Lords, even besting the first, who deemed him worthy of an honorable death. Humans breached the volcano, storming the sacred city of Tollan. In a formal duel, Xiuhcoatl faced Xbalanque, a wary sovereign grasping at his last thrill of battle. At the peak of their battle, Xbalanque fell into phlogiston, paving the way for his rebirth as the Pyro Archon. Xiuhcoatl's body, on the other hand, shrank as his strength faded, his remains scattered beneath the volcano. Let us dive into the tale of Qoyllor and Ukuku. Their story is one of harmony, sacrifice, and duality. It begins with Qoyllor, the refined, radiant, and divine daughter of the sun, who has been watching over the land for as long as she could, but eventually fell down onto the earth. Initially fascinated by this land she's observed for so long, she sets herself on a quest to recover her lost star shards, pieces of her celestial essence, which would allow her to return to the heavens where she belongs. In her quest, she comes across a man named Ukuku, who was, by all means, the embodiment of primal strength. He swears to assist her in her search, and, over a long time, Qoyllor becomes adept at living on the land. Be it hunting, foraging, scavenging, she learned all and applied all from Ukuku and the tribes she came across. The more time the two of them spent together, the closer they became, until it became something deeper. They were now two lovers, both of them symbolizing the union of the earth and the heavens. Over the course of time, Ukuku did not cease assisting Qoyllor in her search, but as he grew so close to her, his insecurity, fear, and jealousy took over. He believes that once Qoyllor recovers all the star shards, she will return to the sky and leave him behind. And so, as he was consumed by this feeling, he stole one of her shards and hid it below ground, ensuring that she would stay forever. As Qoyllor reaches the end of her search, she is certain that all shards should be reunited, yet one of them remains missing. Her wisdom and intuition being unparalleled, she confronts Ukuku about the matter, despite not wishing to know the truth, believing he would not do such a thing. Ukuku becomes silent, evasive, and distant, not engaging in the conversations with her every time the topic was brought up. Soon enough, his guilt consumes him, and he confesses his theft, admitting his fear of losing her. Heartbroken, Qoyllor realizes that their trust has been shattered. Full of sorrow and determination at the same time, Qoyllor returns to the wilds and heads to a large cliff where she paints a massive mural drawn in light for her father, the sun, to notice. Interesting note, this mural can still be seen today, although it is only part of it as the land has shifted since those times, which proves that this tale is not only a children's story. Her father, the sun, most definitely noticed this mural, and upon witnessing what had happened, he immediately pulled Qoyllor back into the sky and punished Ukuku, taking away his sight and leaving him to always be shunned by the sun. Wherever Ukuku would go, a layer of clouds would come cover the sun itself, making everyone in the land aware of his betrayal and leave him to a life of cecity and seclusion. Or perhaps not so. From Qoyllor and Ukuku's union, a child was born. The little one was named Kuntur and bore his mother's eyes. The tribe the family used to live in did not banish the father and son away from their grounds, though they did maintain distance from them. Not only that, the punishment of his father also extended to him. The son would avoid the child just like his father, which caused him to grow sickly pale and weaker than the other children of his tribe. On top of that, he was the only child of his tribe who did not have a Saurian companion. Being only half like his father, Kuntur was not so accepting of this fate and the treatment of others upon him, and so he fought back the children who would laugh and point at him. To no effect, of course. He was weak, he would lose, but he learned, and quickly at that. Given some time, Kuntur was strong enough to quiet the mockery of others towards him, but it only became low whispers. Wishing to have a genuine approval and not one forced through fear, he was determined to achieve something grand. In time, a cloaked individual sought refuge in the tribe, and as their tradition was to bestow kindness upon all, they welcomed the man for a very, very long time. The cloaked man would extend his stays, constantly asking more of the tribesmen who would host him, until the man came knocking expectantly at Ukuku and Kuntur's house. Kuntur quickly mocked the man and chased him away, which made the man reveal himself to be none other than Rumi, an evil sorcerer who has been known in the landscape for a long time. The sorcerer had cast a spell on all who offered him shelter, and while the people were unable to act, he stole the tribe's saurians and made his escape. After coming back to their senses, the tribe sent their 3 mightiest warriors to deal with the sorcerer and bring the saurians back, but they never returned. In the face of this event, having nothing to lose and being used to not rely on a saurian, Kuntur decided to go. The tribesmen did not expect him to succeed, but they did not stop him either. Rumi was meeting his match on every trap he had laid for him, attempting to blind him when missed to no avail thanks to Kuntur having learned hunting techniques from his blind father. With his back against the wall, Rumi summons the 3 strongest warriors, having subjugated them. Kuntur passed through them by force, causing Rumi to attempt more sorcery against his enemy to no effect, as he was not budging or feeling any fear. Rumi then turned into mist and fled in defeat. Coming to rescue the saurians, Kuntur thought he was now powerless to chase the sorcerer if he turned himself into anything he desired, so he looked for the most reliable saurian around, an Ictomisaurus who would help him dispel the witchcraft. But the saurian he found did not see it that way. He only wished to escape, and Kuntur held him firmly until he saw the sadness in the saurian's eyes. Not wishing to be cruel like the sorcerer, he decided to let go of the saurian and allow him to fly away and continue his chase alone. Unfortunately, his senses did not allow him to perceive or dispel where Rumi was, and every search was unsuccessful. However, just like his mother, he stayed determined through his search, and his confidence did not waver. One day, however, he heard the cry of a familiar saurian. It was the Ictomisaurus who had left him days prior. With their duo, Rumi was as good as caught. But he was not going to let himself be captured so easily. He first attempted to flee by transforming into a brown deer, only to notice that Kuntur was as quick as him. Then he changed into a capybara in order to escape in the water. Kuntur had his companion Ictomisaurus summon a gust of wind to push him forward, which allowed him to nearly lay his hands on Rumi, who quickly afterwards transformed into a bird, taking onto the skies. But the duo still chased after him. Despaired, in good Kirby Down Special fashion, Rumi transformed into a giant rock, believing himself to have become impervious to all. Kuntur grabbed Rumi, still as a rock, and requested his saurian friend to keep on flying higher and higher. Eventually, they reached the last layer of clouds, and Kuntur came to witness the sun's glow for the very first time. Before any reaction could be expressed, the sun brought more clouds in front, thicker and colder, surrounding them in storm and rain, and freezing Rumi solid. Escaping this ordeal, they returned to the tribe, praised for their achievements and being widely acknowledged as heroes of the tribe. The fallen empire of Ochkanatlan, said to be built by an ancient tyrant and shelter to a relic able to repel the abyss, was hit by a curse that even the Grandmaster Sanhash, one of the ancient names, would not be able to dispel, causing the Wayob to not be heard in what remains. But it is not all this place is about. In truth, the holy sovereign Ochkan, ruler of the city, had built this empire on top of the ruins of a past dragon city, having reused their structures and roads for his own greatness, noticeable by overly sized roads and the inner spaces of the underground, made to accommodate larger bodies. In modern times, countless adventurers went to look for the relic, but ultimately were lost to this place. And due to the abyss's corruption, their state was such that upon being found again, ending their lives was giving them mercy. Let us set ourselves to the past time. We are in Ochkanatlan. The Python King, then known as the Holy Sovereign of the Empire, discovered an extensive network of ruins submerged below the city, and is now calling onto the tribes under the pretense of voluntary works of a water conservation infrastructure. Nobody volunteered, naturally, and so they requisitioned people from each tribe, except the Flower Feather clan that refused to participate in this project. The labor began and needed to be urgently finished before the next winter to prevent the threat from eradicating the humans that Xbalanque had allowed to thrive, thought Ochkanatlan, the Holy Sovereign. He was certain that no other in the world deserves to be called a god, as Xbalanque was the epitome of humanity that the whole world should bow to. This sense of urgency for the project came from the fact that Ochkanatlan was able to witness the past glory of the civilization before that of humans. It was one of dragons who had access to weapons that could tear down the heavens and subjugate the world once more if they were given the chance to resurface. In all fairness, the world initially belonged to the Dragonborn before the invasion of Phanes, creator of the heavenly principles. But if they were so mighty and wise, how did they fall? Fear not, level 13 wizard. You will soon be able to class change into a scholar through this story. The workers were initially highly motivated, but as they progressed deeper still, this project took a toll on many of the citizens, as they were secluded from the surface and leaving them to work continuously in the dark underground, surrounded by water and humidity. This condition caused most of the workers to lose their lives, and the luckier ones to lose their limbs due to the humidity rotting their bodies, on top of having to work next to the dead bodies of their former friends as they were too weak to bury anyone, throwing them into holes. According to a worker's note, one of them lost himself to laughter, tears, and screams as he noticed an abnormally large, repulsive silhouette in the depth of the waterways, mentioning that this entity had shrieked a terrifying, profane song that ordered him to bow down to its master. Following this, the remaining workers were naturally more tense than before, hearing whispers and inexplicable sounds coming from below the water and within the walls. The project is cut short and indefinitely suspended, following with the city being submerged by a dark calamity coming from the waterways, transforming all the innocent residents into infected abominations. The warriors who are present incinerate the infected people alive with the cleansing flames of the Holy Sovereign Ochkanatlan. The warriors, being certain that it would be enough to seize this corruption, left the matter at that. But now, the scent of the plague is invading the streets, and the corrupting clouds are still spreading. The southwest part of the city has now been sealed off, with warriors still attempting to incinerate what of those things remained, without success. Despite the flesh of those beings decaying, they, or it, still roamed the closed-off city. Insecurity grows, and wails of despair accompany the night wind, from both the living sphere and the entities that thread both realms, having their souls torn to shreds. At the same time, the gates to the heart of the city are not holding anymore. Those abominations are attempting to break it down and breach the city. In response to this, Ochkanatlan came to understand a way to power the ancient technology of dragons through the core of Xiuhcoatl, which requires draconic energy. Because of his ancestry, Ochkanatlan was able to separate his human and draconic self, inserting his soul with the core and enslaving the draconic part of himself to humanity, wishing for humans to be supreme and dragons below them, even if Ochkanatlan is himself part dragon. In this process, he separated his soul from his body, which became the one of a tainted, vengeful wyvern. Yes, it is a wyvern, not a dragon. An interesting side note, as we will keep expanding on Ochkanatlan's character, which currently seems contradictory between the cruel ruler and his sacrifice for his people. Back in the times where unpaid workers were advancing in the waterways, those who refused to keep working in face of the otherworldly entities were not met with punishment, but, I quote, "By his grace, the rebellious workers will be denied 3 weeks of rations. How magnanimous of him." Unfortunately, his sacrifice was not enough, and the monstrous entities took over the nation, manipulating the bodies of former friends. In a last endeavor, the city was sealed entirely, trapping the demons within its walls. His last wish was to preserve the kindling of humanity's hope in these walls. And the hope did survive, through his sky-soaring ship that the legends mentioned, named the Tonatiuh, hosting the relic that can repel the abyss and save humanity. 490 years back, tribesmen who reached the Tonatiuh found the meaning of the famed relic, which proved ancient dragons managed to create a weapon able to dismantle the abyss's influence, something that opposes the nature of the dragons, who are aligned with the light realm. This discovery also confirms that the existence of this flying treasure ship was to aim for the sky city of Celestia, far above Ochkanatlan. The ship was built under Ochkan, who was known from this deed as the Python King for his betrayal, as he abused his people to build this ship. Not only that, Ochkan enslaved the dragon descendants we know as Saurians to power the ancient dragon's technology, as in the past, when they were still at their pinnacle, it was them who enslaved humanity. Ochkan and his empire met their downfall before being able to seek any sort of refuge aboard that ship, but he did manage to send something very valuable with it into the skies, which eludes us for now. Despite this unfinished ending for Ochkan, it has been said that he was in fact put down by the second Pyro-Archon, who is unnamed, as Ochkan's rule was deemed too cruel to continue. As the tribesmen who reached the Tonatiuh discovered, the ship never held a solution to save the people. Instead, they were deceived by the essence of this cleansing relic, which remains unclear for now. It appears that this relic was, as it stands, nothing more than an unfinished prototype which could have saved the land. This relic was so advanced that it had cost much of the strength and energy of its dragon creators, preventing them from progressing further and causing them to lose everything, as if they had spent their entire evolution budget in this relic. Xbalanque and Ochkan had realized that the rules of the heavenly principles would only bind humanity to the earth, making them the puppets of the Lord of the Night, who is one of the few remaining envoys of Celestia as a greater Seelie. Yes, I do mention a lot that the envoys of Celestia used to be Seelies, but I simply find it entertaining that such great beings were reduced to a few primogems. Although, to be fair, there is quite a touching story behind their current state. I could tell you that story, but this is not a Genshin Impact story analysis channel. This is a Fortnite lore channel. It is made clear that the Tonatiuh was created to follow Xbalanque's will to conquer the heavens. He had come to witness the beings roaming among the true stars, revealing to him that every empire will cost greatly to humanity's advancement, becoming barriers because of their breakthroughs in evolution, which are not meant to be granted to them. This is very akin to the universal theory of the Great Filter, in which it is believed that a civilization will eventually reach a wall that will seize their advance and cause them to go extinct and be followed by a new civilization which will, in turn, either breach this wall into the next, or eternally be stuck onto this evolutionary milestone. This ties intriguingly to the story within Men of Lithin. A civilization came to discover the energy source known as Lithin, and, as a result, their technology flourished, skyscrapers, flying shuttles, automated field tillers, made possible by Lithin, an element found incredibly deep underground and controlled entirely by the technocracy who had discovered this energy in a settlement known as Natlan. Interestingly, Council Record number B-CL-13097 refers to Tollan or parts of it as Natlan, aligning perfectly with its time period. The city's reliance on Lithin was absolute, but a faction known as the Unenlightened sought to dismantle this dependency, fearing the damage it caused to the land. During investigations into these rebels, an agent inhaled a concealed gas known as ignorance. The effect was devastating. Everything known became unknown, and the unknown became glaringly obvious. A horrifying truth was revealed. A human was not human at all. Instead, it was an abomination, sunken-faced, a body of bone and machinery, eyes like the void. When pointing at an enormous reptilian entity with a grotesquely large head, the reality was laid bare. This thing was a human. A real one. Those who thought themselves as humans were not what they believed. They were creations of an ancient race that once ruled the land, those original humans. After a great war, the air became toxic to these original beings, so they engineered a new race, biologically inverted from them. What was poison to one was breathable to the other. This new humanity was built with a singular purpose, to repeat the cycle. By overusing Lithin and polluting the world once more, the original beings could reclaim their land, and some had already returned, unseen, unless one had embraced ignorance. The link to Tollan is undeniable with its mentions of Natlan, but here's where it gets interesting. Upon the travelers' arrival, the automatons refer to humans in quotation marks. Just like in Men of Lithin, these dragon-shaped machines have bone-colored slender limbs and large heads, matching the description of the original beings in the story, who had lost a war, reflecting the one against the heavenly principles. Given Kukulkan's creation of human-dragon hybrids and Dragon's extensive manipulation of humanity's evolution, it adds weight. Adding to this, the real forms of these beings is revealed through the gas known as ignorance, and as we know, Kukulkan and other dragons are able to shapeshift at will by manipulating the essence of phlogiston. The Men of Lithin had to dig exceedingly deep to reach Natlan for Lithin, where the dragons were, but from our perspective, since Tollan is inside the volcano, it is not deep at all, merely ground level, unless the digging started from the other side of the land. That's right, Khaenri'ah. Khaenri'ah's excavation would make sense of Natlan's perceived depth, not to mention, Tollan's false sky has been breached, but the markings left behind aren't typical of an abyssal invasion. This is what it would look like instead. Instead, they bear the same shape as the star crest of Khaenri'ah. Oblivious to the true nature of what they found, they drained phlogiston and named it Lithin. All the while the original beings who once thrived on this land awaited the inevitable. Humans of Khaenri'ah, unwittingly fulfilling their role, polluted their world with phlogiston. To the dragons of the ancient era, who drew their strength from the untainted primal flame, this substance was not mere fuel, but lifeblood that would allow them to regain their regular, gracious forms. I don't know what to say to sound cool from these deductions here, so hey. Oh, and speaking of hidden connections, did you know there's already a door leading to Khaenri'ah in-game? Despite being an open secret in my small but intellectually superior community, which you should definitely join, no character, not even Kaya or Arlecchino, ever acknowledges it. And that wraps up my very conclusive theory on Men of Lithin.
A tale passed along the tribe refers to a cruel volcano lord who claimed the spot after the dragons fled, in the appearance of a black and purple giant salamander. It was said to be a wicked being who committed all possible vile acts. The truth of this volcano lord being nothing more than a metaphor to refer to the abyss itself, making the tale more bearable for children. The elder was ready to sacrifice himself to pin down the volcano lord, or the abyss. He references the use of a black flood guided by two of his foreign friends. It was either the abyss itself or, once again, the forbidden knowledge. These friends, coming from Kenria, are known in the Natlan folklore to be figures of evil, as per their personal wish. But they were in fact heroes. These two characters are entirely omitted from the books and history, despite their own sacrifice allowing the sealing of the abyss and the survival of Elder Traore. He, in turn, acknowledges the weakness of the Shadow Pins, as they are not an eternal seal by themselves, and must be often, let's say, replanted, but that strength lies in the immortal, indomitable spirit of the people of Natlan, compensating the pins' weakening over time with their strength that never dies. That is until you, as the Traveler, step in and solve the issue, seemingly for the foreseeable future and for good, sealing the abyss away and granting you an audience with the spirits of the past.
Now onto the modern day details. The Fatui's involvement is evident, with the Dottore's presence implied once more through research on the Kuuvahki, a project tied to the essence of the moons. If you missed the details, my previous video here covers how Dottore's plans intersect with Natlan. The head of this project is Madame Kuuvahki, who had become the target of a subtle assassination request. Warrant Officer Tatiana, eager for a promotion and return to Snisnaya, is planning to eliminate Kuuvahki during her voyage home. However, this warrant officer should not be confused with the one from Long Night's Oath. It appears that this time, the Fatui aren't all on agreeing terms as to the research project regarding the moons. Additionally, Helka's notes mention relics in Nod-Krai with patterns similar to the one of the primeval source dragon mech that the Traveler and the Little One fought. She speculates that something massive dragged the bit of land that makes Nod-Krai toward Snisnaya from Natlan, possibly explaining how this paradise emerged so suddenly in Teyvat's history. Frost Moon scions in the region seem to hold a similar relic to the primeval source dragon mech, hinting at a deeper connection to be explored in the future. Returning to Tollan after its fall, we can notice that the floating islands harbor the same shape as Celestia. The false sky was breached, leaving jagged, star-shaped voids in the horizon, while the static effect upon the fissures in the sky mirror those seen during the Archon quest in their final endeavor to banish their eternal abyssal enemy. The bright minds of Tollan had completed Huitzilopochtli, a device that could only be operated by the Chosen of Dragons. This title represents both a Saurian blessed by the primal flame and a human who must guide the Saurian to their destiny. Huitzilopochtli has the power to erase and rewrite the very meaning of life. Natlan will be transformed into a land of pure phlogiston, the essence of primal fire, source of the world's heat, light, and a counterpart to the primordial sea. If the Chosen of Dragons activated the device, phlogiston would spill all over Teyvat, absorbing it and redefining life itself. A common misconception is that the Little One would merely become the new Pyro Sovereign. In truth, they would transcend such a title, becoming something beyond existence, capable of recalling life's meaning but never grasping it again. A literal god, incomprehensible and indescribable, beyond the powers of the heavenly principles and Xbalanque. The abyss would be eradicated for billions of years, as if a new Big Bang had occurred, with the Little One at its core, forever trapped in the echoes of life's meaning. This rewriting effect would likely impact only the beings of Teyvat. As an outsider, the Traveler might remain unaffected. Additionally, Kukulkan suggests that Paimon could also be immune, yet another clue in the ongoing Paimon final boss agenda. Finally, there is mention of a mysterious wanderer, dangerous enough that the Fatui actively avoid him. Here's my deduction. This individual has succumbed to sorcery. Having gazed into an abyss of boundless darkness, he gouged out his own eyes and now seeks specific gems, perhaps an ore called sulfurite, to replace them and shield him from the horrors he has seen. Despite combing through every available in-game text, I couldn't definitively identify him. I suspect this all builds toward an eventual reveal in Marijivari, and you already know I'll be covering it when the time comes. If you've stuck with me this long, I appreciate your support and I salute you. With sword in hand and wisdom in heart, Sir Eoth bids thee farewell.